My daughter-in-law slapped me across the face and demanded my house keys. The same house I built, the same door I once opened to welcome her in. Have you ever raised someone with love only to be treated like you don't belong in your own home? Because that's exactly what happened to me. This is my story, one of sacrifice, silence, betrayal, and what happened the day I finally said enough. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Hit the subscribe button. Because here at Hearts and Scars, we speak the truths no one else dares to. It was a quiet, sunny morning, the kind where birds chirp at just the right pitch and the light slipping through the curtains feels like a warm invitation to begin the day slowly. I had just finished dusting off the photo frames in the hallway, memories of my son's childhood, birthdays, school plays. I used to straighten them every morning like a ritual, like a silent reminder of the life I'd built. I heard loud voices coming from the front porch, but didn't think much of it until I caught my name. That was different. I moved quietly, heart skipping just a little, and opened the front door. And there she was, my daughter-in-law, Tanya, standing in the middle of the yard, yelling so loud the neighbors had started peeking through their windows. My son, Mark, just stood behind her, motionless. "You old woman! Give me the damn keys!" At first, I thought I misheard. She stormed up the steps, shouting words I can't even repeat here. She said I was clinging to what wasn't mine, that the house should have been handed over already, that I was mentally unfit, that they didn't need me anymore, that I was just a burden. I was still standing in shock when she leaned forward and, without warning, slapped me hard across the face. Time stopped. The sound echoed louder than the slap itself. Maybe because everything around us was so painfully silent. Mark, my only son, didn't flinch, didn't stop her, didn't step forward, just stood there like a stranger. Like she had every right. I didn't react. Not physically. My face burned, my ears rang, but my hands remained at my sides. Across the street, Mrs. Jenkins from 3 doors down stood frozen with her watering can suspended mid-air. A dog stopped barking. Even the wind seemed to hush. And yet somehow John and Tanya carried on as if nothing about this situation was out of place. She held out her hand and hissed, "Where are the keys?" But what shattered me wasn't the blistering voice, wasn't even the sting on my cheek that radiated into my jaw. It was the silence of my son. He looked at the ground. That day, I realized the slap didn't break me. His silence did. But I didn't give her the keys, not yet, because what she didn't know, what he didn't expect, was that in that very moment, something inside of me finally woke up. And once I opened my eyes, there was no going back. It wasn't always like this. If someone had told me 5 years ago that Tanya would slap me on my own porch, that my son would be standing there like a statue made of shame and silence, I would have called them crazy. But stories like mine, they never fall apart all at once. They unravel, slowly, like a thread slipping between careless fingers. I remember the day they moved in, barely a month after their small wedding at the courthouse. Tanya wore a dusty beige dress and a stone face. Mark looked nervous, like he always did around her. They had lost their jobs due to layoffs in the economy, and their apartment lease had run out. Mark sat at my kitchen table, holding Tanya's hand, and asked if they could stay with me, just for a while. "Just until we save up," he said. "We'll help out around the house." Of course I said yes. I didn't even hesitate. Why would I? This house was built on love, not bricks. And I believed families should never sleep in cars or shelters while a mother's sofa sat empty. They stayed in the guest room that first week. I cooked. Tanya didn't say much but smiled politely. Mark helped trim the hedges, fixed a leaky faucet. It felt nice, even. Alive. Then bills started piling up, and I volunteered to cover their portions. Just until you're back on your feet, I told them. Then Tanya started paying things directly. Gas, internet, even groceries. Small things at first. I thought, that's sweet, she's trying. But over time, she began rerouting mail, updating addresses, giving out the house number like it was hers. I didn't question it. I let them make choices, make updates, paint the guest room without asking. I called it independence. I called it growth. But what I didn't realize was each time I gave something away, I let go of a piece of myself. The kitchen no longer smelled like my spices. The shelves no longer held my memories. They replaced my rug. They called my backyard theirs. At first, I thought I was helping. I had no idea I was handing over my life. Looking back now, I don't know the exact moment everything shifted. There was no loud crash, no confrontation, just a series of tiny, quiet offenses that built themselves into a storm. At first, it was just little things. Tanya started reorganizing the kitchen, my kitchen, without saying a word. One day, I reached for the sugar and found spice jars where they'd never been before. I smiled, told her I liked the changes, even though I didn't. She started doing all the grocery shopping without asking what I needed. Then came the guests, her friends, her cousins, her people, brought into my home without so much as a heads up. And when I tiptoed downstairs once to say hello, she looked at me like I was an interruption. "Oh, do you want something?" she asked, hand on her hip. That moment stayed with me, more than the words. I felt like a child in my own house, like I hadn't paid the mortgage here, cried in this kitchen, laughed in this hallway. Slowly, Tanya became the one who answered the doorbell, who told the plumber what to fix, who corrected me during conversations, like I was some rambling, forgetful old woman. But the hardest part wasn't Tanya. It was Mark. My son changed in layers I couldn't peel back. I'd speak and he'd cut me off gently. I'd suggest something and he'd look to Tanya for confirmation before replying. One night after dinner, I reminded him about our tradition of Sunday tea. Just us, like we used to. He smiled, but it wasn't the one I raised. "Ma, we're just so busy now. Another time, okay?" That another time never came. So I got quieter, stopped reminding them I was there, started whispering instead of speaking. Little by little, I disappeared from my own house, and no one noticed. I used to love Sundays. I'd wake up early, boil fresh ginger in a small pot, and sip my tea on the balcony while the morning light warmed the curtains in the hallway. The house felt like mine then, safe, familiar, like I still had a place. But those moments faded, not all at once, but painfully, piece by piece. First, the TV remote disappeared from where I always kept it. I searched, assuming maybe I misplaced it, until I heard laughter from the living room. Tanya was watching one of her shows with earbuds in, feet up on the table, and the remote in her lap. When I asked if I could switch it to the evening news, she said, "Oh, didn't realize you were using it. You can watch later, right?" Later never came. Then it was my cooking. I'd always made Sunday stew, a family recipe from my mother. The grand aroma would wrap the house in something warm and grounding. One week, I found all the ingredients replaced. My spices were pushed to the back of the shelf. Tanya had ordered Thai takeout for everyone. I once came out in my pajamas late at night to get a glass of water, only to find two strangers in my living room drinking wine and laughing. I must have looked startled because Tanya turned to me and said, "Oh, these are my friends. We're just hanging out. Why don't you go lay down?" Go lay down? Like a child past bedtime? Like a guest who overstayed? Like a burden? I no longer felt safe to roam freely in my own home. I avoided the kitchen when she was there. I stayed in my room longer and longer, afraid of being in the way, afraid of being seen, or worse, not seen at all. Mark barely noticed, or maybe he chose not to, and I kept telling myself it was just temporary, that things would go back to normal once they found their own place, once they appreciated everything I'd done. But as the weeks turned into months, and the months into years, they moved into my home, and I slowly moved into the background, from an owner to an afterthought. It started with the mail. One morning, I saw a utility bill addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Mark Daniels. Not in an envelope, not tucked away, but lying open on the kitchen counter. My name, which had always been printed in bold, was gone. Confused, I placed it aside, thinking maybe it was sent in error. But then it happened again and again. More bills, more statements, more documents started coming in with her name, with his name, with our address, but not mine. Tanya began introducing the house differently. I overheard her once while on the phone with one of her friends. "Oh, yes, we bought a beautiful place. Big backyard, old architecture, perfect for entertaining." Excuse me? She didn't buy anything. Neither did Mark. They were still getting back on their feet, or so they said. Their names weren't on the deed. I paid every tax, handled every repair, every upgrade. Still, she told everyone that this house was theirs. Then came the bigger shifts. Packages started arriving with furniture, her style. I came home from visiting an old friend one afternoon and found the living room completely rearranged. My couch was gone. The chairs replaced. My mother's antique lamp was sitting in the garage like junk. When I asked about it, Tanya didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, we're modernizing the space. Hope that's okay." Hope that's okay. In a home where they'd paid not even a dime in rent for over 2 years. The final straw wasn't even spoken aloud. It came in the form of a document, folded neatly in an envelope, placed on my nightstand. It was a joint ownership clause draft. Unsigned, but prepared. It had all the markings of someone quietly trying to make an official claim on something their soul hadn't earned. And suddenly I realized this wasn't just about staying anymore. They didn't want to live with me. They wanted to take my place entirely. That night, I didn't sleep. Because for the first time, I wasn't mourning what was lost. I was calculating what I'd need to take back. The morning it happened was deceptively peaceful. I had woken early, as always, boiled water for tea, and sat by the window watching the breeze ripple across the old maple in the yard. For once, I felt like I had a minute to myself. The house was quiet. But peace never stays long when you're living with people who have already claimed the walls as their own. I heard Tanya's heels first, her footsteps sharper than usual, slicing through the hallway like warning bells. Then came the slam of a cabinet, the rustling of papers, the edge in her voice as she muttered something aggressively to Mark. I stepped into the kitchen, still in my slippers. Letters and bills were scattered across the table, all addressed to them. "What's going on?" I asked softly. She looked up, eyes already fueled with rage. "What's going on? What's going on is you've made things difficult for no reason. Mark and I are trying to move forward, and you're stuck in the past." Before I could respond, she picked up the house keys hanging on the hook by the stove and turned back to me. "Why are your keys still the only ones holding this place together?" Mark stood back, arms crossed, eyes to the floor. I stepped forward and reached out, gently, not to take anything, but to speak. "This is my home, Tanya. Still is. I bought it. I built it. And I let you stay." "Let me?" She cut in, laughing bitterly. "Do you think this is still yours?" Her face twisted, voice rising. "We're the ones paying bills now. We practically own this place. You don't even do anything around here. You've got one foot in the grave, and you think you can control us?" My breath caught. My hands trembled, not in fear, but in disbelief. I looked at my son, my baby boy, the one I raised through hardship and heartbreak, and he looked away. And just like that, Tanya stepped forward and slapped me. A sharp, vicious sound echoed through the room as her palm met my cheek. The pain was instant, but not surprising. What stunned me more was how familiar it felt. Not physically, but emotionally. After all, hadn't they been slapping me with their silence for years? Tanya dropped the keys between us and growled, "Give me the damn originals." "The house is ours now." I didn't speak. I backed away slowly, face burning, tears threatening to rise, but my jaw held firm. Because at that moment, something inside me didn't just crack. It shifted. And in its place, a quiet, cold calm settled. They thought this was victory. But for me, that slap wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the real story. After they left the room, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Their voices had bounced off these walls moments ago, yelling, accusing, tearing through me like wind through an open door. But now, nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the hallway under their footsteps. I stood there, one hand gently placed on my cheek, still warm from the sting. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't crying. No, I was thinking. I walked slowly to my room and closed the door behind me. Not slammed, closed, like closing the cover of a book whose chapter you never want to read again. I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by the same wallpaper I'd chosen when Mark was just a little boy. It still had faded butterfly patterns next to old family photos. He used to run into this room every night after a bad dream, and now he wouldn't even meet my eyes after watching his wife slap me across the face. Somewhere in that moment, my mind drifted to every other moment I had ignored. The way Tanya rolled her eyes when I reminded her not to leave the stove on. The way Mark dismissed my stories with an impatient, "Yeah, Ma, we know." The nights they locked their bedroom door and shut me out completely. And I kept telling myself, it's okay, it'll get better. Because that's what mothers do, right? We wait, we absorb, we bury the pain somewhere between our silence and our smiles. But something about their voices being gone made the silence feel different. It wasn't heavy with sadness. It was clean, like still water right before a storm, like the breath before a big decision. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And quietly, without telling anyone, I picked up a pen and began writing down everything I was going to take back. Because they thought slapping me was power, but they had no idea. The most dangerous woman is the one who's finally done being silent. I didn't tell anyone, not Mark, not Tanya, not my sister Diana on the phone, who usually hears every detail of my day. No, this part was mine. Because when you're a woman who's tolerated too much for too long, your next move isn't for show, it's for survival. The morning after the slap, I woke up early. I boiled my tea, sat near the window as I always did, only this time I didn't cry. I didn't stare into the yard hoping for the life I used to have. Instead, I opened the drawer of my old writing desk and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years, the one marked just in case. Inside it were the original property documents, the deed, the proof that this house, every nail, every window, every tile was mine. That afternoon, while they went out shopping, I printed out every bank statement that showed my payments. I dug up emails, texts, even receipts from the light bulbs I'd bought, all lined with my name and my signature. Years of being the one who paid, the one who fixed, the one who handled everything quietly while they disrespected me loudly. Then, I picked up the phone and called a lawyer, a warm-spoken woman named Carla who specialized in elder abuse and property disputes within families. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't flinch, and when I was done talking, she simply said, "You're doing the right thing." Next came the locks. I went to the hardware store and smiled faintly when the man at the counter said, "New home?" And I replied, "No, just reclaiming the one I already had." Over the next 4 days, I rewired everything. I locked documents in a safe locks. I unlinked their names from my utility accounts. I signed a new will. I froze the co-signed credit card we were misusing. I even installed cameras at every door, just in case. And guess what? They never noticed. Because they were too used to me being invisible. But I was done staying silent to keep them comfortable. Because when they slapped me, they thought I would stay broken. But I don't shatter anymore. I strategize. It didn't take long for them to notice the change. Not in me, but in what they were losing. Tanya was the first to tense up. She asked why the gas bill bounced. Why didn't the card not work at the grocery store? Why weren't their names showing up anymore? I told her nothing, just smiled and said, "Oh, must be a system error." And the calmer I stayed, the more nervous they became. But I didn't expect what came next. 3 days later, Mark knocked gently on my bedroom door. It was the softest I'd heard him knock in years. He wasn't alone. Tanya stood behind him, arms crossed, and with them was a man I'd never seen before. "Mom," Mark began, "this is Mr. Eldridge. He's a family advisor, and, we're real worried about you." I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just looked them over, one by one, waiting for the lie to fully unfold. Mr. Eldridge opened a small black folder. Inside were documents labeled guardianship consideration, another labeled power of attorney request. They were trying to flip it. "We're not saying you're unwell,
Tanya chimed in, her voice dripping fake warmth. "We're just concerned. You've been forgetful, financially unstable. Mark says you've been isolating." Isolating? I stared at the son I raised, who now stood beside his wife like an obedient child, letting words be put into his mouth by someone who just wanted control. They didn't come to fix anything. They came to take everything legally. I stood slowly, calmly.
The power they expected me to fight with, I didn't give them, because they were expecting a meltdown. But what they got was a counterattack built on truth. I walked to the drawer beside my recliner. I pulled out a thick folder and dropped it onto the coffee table. Deeds, payment logs, text printouts, photos showing damage I fixed, charges they put on the card I paid off, and finally, a letter from my own attorney, stamped, verified, sealed. I looked at Mr. Eldridge and said, "You may want to read that before making any assumptions about my health." He took the letter, read it slowly. His smile fell by the second paragraph. "This changes things," he muttered. No apology came. Not from him, not from Tanya, not even from my son, who stood there blinking like he couldn't believe I'd fought back. But I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I was looking for peace, and I was willing to burn whatever they tried to build on my name to get it. I didn't scream. I didn't toss them out. I didn't become what they expected, a bitter, angry old woman burning down her own legacy. No, I became what they feared most, a woman who stops asking for respect and starts walking toward freedom. The next morning, they found a letter on the coffee table. Short, calm, stronger than any confrontation I could have staged. Effective at the end of next month, this house will be listed for sale. I will be relocating into a smaller residence that suits my needs. You are kindly asked to make arrangements and vacate by the 25th. With care, Renata. That was it. No arguments, no discussions, just a final line, like a period at the end of a very long chapter that should have ended years ago. At first, they didn't believe me. Tanya rolled her eyes. Mark said, "Wait, now? Just like that?" Yes, just like that. Days passed in cold silence, but I didn't care. I began packing my things, not just my clothes and books, but my peace, my strength, my new boundaries. Each item I tucked into a box felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had shoved into the shadows. I scheduled contractor appointments. A real estate agent met with me privately. My lawyer finalized everything neatly. They begged, but only when the paperwork became real. Tanya even tried crying. Mark mumbled things like, "We didn't mean," but never finished a single thought. And I felt nothing. Not cruel, not cold, just free. When moving day came, I walked room to room, not in grief, but with quiet thanks. This house had held me for decades. It had seen love, tears, laughter, and loss. But now, it was time to close the door. I handed the final key to the realtor, not with a shaky hand, but a steady one. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing myself, my peace, my future. Because after a lifetime of giving, it was time I gave something to myself. And as I drove away that day, I didn't look back. Because I wasn't leaving my home. I was finally going toward it. People always assume that silence means weakness, that a woman who doesn't fight back immediately must be fragile, afraid, powerless. But what they don't see is the storm she's planning behind that stillness. Because I wasn't weak. I was waiting.
Waiting for the day I no longer feel guilty for choosing myself. Waiting for the day when I could afford to stop asking and start deciding. Waiting for the day my story wouldn't be one of survival, but of reclamation. And that day finally came. You see, strength doesn't always sound like shouting. Sometimes it's the heavy quiet of a woman loading boxes, not just full of dishes and books, but full of years of pain she's putting away for good. Sometimes strength is staring at someone you once raised and accepting, painfully, that they aren't who you thought they were, and walking away anyway. I used to think being a good mother meant sacrificing everything, swallowing my emotions, letting things go, keeping peace, even if it meant losing myself. But now, I know being a mother, a woman, a human being, also means drawing a line when your love is seen as a leash. I waited not because I was unsure, but because I wanted my exit to be true, final, free. Do I miss the version of my son I once knew? Yes. Do I mourn the life that could have been, had love been enough? Every day. But I don't carry that mourning anymore. I've buried it. And from that spot, I grew something new. My voice, my boundaries, my self-worth. I used to be silent all those years because I didn't have words. I was silent because I was saving them for the moment I'd finally be heard. If you've ever been silenced in a house you paid for, if you've ever fed people who later turned their backs on you, if you've ever watched your child become a stranger, I want you to know something. You are not alone. These stories, they're not just mine. They belong to mothers, grandmothers, and women everywhere who gave everything quietly and were still made to feel like nothing. Maybe this story reminded you of your own. Maybe it hurt to hear. Maybe it helped you finally breathe. If any part of this story touched your heart, please subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to know, how far do stories like this still travel? Because here at Hearts and Scars, we don't just tell stories. We uncover truths and honor the people who lived them, one scar at a time. With love, Renata.